Welcome. I'm so pleased to be joining you today and having you join me. This is going to be a lot of fun, and I think that you're going to learn some things that you probably didn't know before. So let's get started. Let's start looking at your financial blueprint, because what I need for you to do with me today is think big. And if you have the idea that you already think big, then think bigger, because we need to be way outside the box. In order to ignite your millionaire mind, we're going to be asking a lot of different questions, and we're going to be looking at strategies that maybe you haven't thought of before, or if you've thought about them, then maybe you haven't quite thought of them in the way that I'm going to present them to you today. So let's take a look at this, because what we're going to do is shift your paradigm. And I mean you, everybody. I've been through this myself. It's something that I think we all go through, because we inherit a lot of things from our families, which is exactly the right way. They're our role models. They're the people that we love and we're the closest to. And so a lot of our beliefs and a lot of our attitudes and our habits all come from a family situation. But I'm going to take you on a journey today from where you are to where you want to be. And the distance for that journey is from one ear to the other. In other words, it's the space between your ears in your head, because that's where the paradigm shifts. So let's look at this. You know, I think we are all in a mode a lot of times where we're on what has been referenced as the deferred life plan. We talk a lot about wanting to create a luxury lifestyle now, but the fallback position is that we've got to abandon, we've got to let go of that deferred life plan. We've got to learn to leverage and use time and mobility. So play what if with me for just a minute, because what question would you ask in order to get out of the deferred life plan? Well, is $1 million in the bank a fantasy for you? Do you believe that $1 million would fund the lifestyle that you would love to be living? Now, some of you may already be living the $1 million lifestyle. But for those of you who are not, then come with me to ask some different questions. Timothy Ferriss, one of my favorite authors, and for those of you who have read the 4-Hour Work Week, the new expanded and updated version is now out. For those of you who haven't read it, I'm going to be recommending some books to you throughout this webinar today. So the first book I recommend to you is Get the 4-Hour Work Week by Timothy Ferriss. He spells his last name Ferriss. He has probably done what most people say they would love to do. But here's how he framed the question. How can I achieve the millionaire lifestyle of complete freedom without first having $1 million? Well, isn't that the ultimate question? And over the years, with all the clients I've had and just from my own personal experiences, here's what's happened in my journey to get to that paradigm shift. Because he's right. You need to have the mindset for the millionaire lifestyle way before you have the $1 million in the bank. And what happens with most of us, and I include myself in that because I've been there, done that. I've got that closet full of T-shirts. What happens with most of us is that we become addicted to struggle, to suffering. You know, it's just like the runner who becomes addicted to running and the endorphin rush. I mean, we get into our drama, right? Oh, I don't have this. Oh, I'm not good enough for that. I mean, we've got a litany of these phrases that we use I say we use them against ourselves because it doesn't do us any good, and it's that mind chatter that goes on that tears us down and makes us believe that we can't do what we really want to do. Well, of course we can do it, but we have to get beyond that mind chatter. We also have to get beyond, and this was the major revelation to my life, because I finally got it, that what I had to get beyond was wanting the approval for struggling and suffering and not feeling that I was good enough and not having enough and all of those catchphrases that we use. Wanting the approval, I mean, that was like the revelation of a lifetime for me. So let's get beyond that, because what goes on after that is just so much more fun. Let me take you through a brief little history of money. Since money is the keynote of most of the things that we think about, I mean, money funds the lifestyle that we want. It may not be the most important thing in life, but it certainly is a major thing in our lives, because our economy is based on it, and a lot of what we do in our lives is based on the use of money. So have you ever thought about what the history of money is? Well, I'm only going to take you back just a little ways, about a century. Let me just take you on a really fast trip here. In 1904, the reason I chose that particular date is because that's when John D. Rockefeller, whom you may recognize, the Rockefeller family, that's when John D. Rockefeller created the Education Board in the United States. The interesting thing about that was that he created an education system that did not include financial education. And it was on purpose, quite frankly, because he did not want people to necessarily understand anything about finances. He controlled the petroleum industry, and he needed workers who could read, write, and follow instruction, but not understand financial nuances. So in the education system that Rockefeller created, financial education was not a part of it. And unfortunately, that has followed us all these many 100 years plus, and we are now, just now, finally starting to get financial education courses in our school systems. But it has not been a part of it. And I've taught at the college level for many years, and I can tell you that what we teach in finance at the academic level still does not really educate us with regard to financial education the way I think about it, in terms of how we use that to work for us in our businesses, in our personal lives, etc. Okay, jump with me now to 1913. Rockefeller invited the members of the banking trust, and let me give you an idea of who the banking trust was, because you're going to recognize these names. People like J.P. Morgan, Jesse Livermore, the Lehman Brothers, yes, the famous Lehman Brothers. That whole group of financiers that kind of ruled the financial world along with Rockefeller at that day and time. He invited all of those people to go with him in his private rail car to Jekyll Island, because he had a private residence on Jekyll Island, which is an island off of the coast of Georgia. And out of this meeting, the Federal Reserve was born. I'm sure Federal Reserve is a name that you've heard a lot of lately. That's where the Federal Reserve came from. The genesis of that came from the meeting on Jekyll Island. What most people don't realize is that the Federal Reserve is a private company owned by private shareholders. And it's not quasi-governmental. It's not totally run by the government. It's a private, for-profit corporation. That whole system was known as the Mandrake system. The Mandrake system literally borrows prosperity out of the future and spends it today. let me just give you a little quip, and I don't mean this to be political in any way. It's an observation about a political reality, and that is that Democrats tax and spend, Republicans borrow and spend. And so the creation of the Mandrake system, when I say that it borrows prosperity out of the future and spends it today, I'm going to show you at the end of this how that actually happens. 1913 was a year when a couple of other things happened as well. Congress passed the act to create the income tax, and World War I started. Now, 1921 is an interesting year because the history books generally don't report it. In 1921, the worst depression in U.S. history occurred. Actually, it was even worse than the crash of 1929. It lasted for 1 year, and the market corrected itself. There was no government intervention or bailout. The market did what the market is supposed to do. It did a market correction. Then, of course, in 1929, we all know what happened there. That was the beginning of the Great Depression. Okay, jump to 1933. And I'm going to be making big jumps here because there are keystone years that I want to point out to you in this little timeline journey that we're taking. 1933 was the year that the U.S. government bought gold back from U.S. citizens and basically declared the private ownership of gold illegal. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement was signed, and this again involves the banking trust, the same people we talked about in 1913. The banking trust met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to design a plan for a new monetary system. And so as a result of this, the World Bank was created, the International Monetary Fund was created, and basically that central banking system, which in our country is the Federal Reserve as the central bank, that central banking system was spread worldwide. And these institutions were created in the Bretton Woods Agreement. So every country had to hold U.S. dollars in their central bank. Since the U.S. dollar was the only currency at that time backed by precious metal, it was backed by gold on the world monetary market, all other countries, through their respective central banks, held U.S. dollars to back their own currencies. So literally, backing with U.S. dollars was as good as backing with the gold itself, because dollars were backed by gold. So if you've ever wondered why all of these central banks around the world have so much U.S. dollars in them, that's the reason. They are still holding huge quantities of U.S. dollars in all of the central banks around the world. In 1965, silver in our coinage was abandoned. So silver in dimes, for example, or quarters went away. There is some small percentage, I don't know exactly what the percentage is, but instead of being almost all silver, it's now just, it's mostly an alloy with just some very small percentage of silver in it. In 1971, President Nixon took the U.S. monetary system off the gold standard. At this point, money became a debt, not an asset. And I'm going to talk about that just a little bit more in a second. Because now, money is basically a promissory note that's based on the good faith and credit of the U.S. government. It only has value to the extent that people believe that the government will back its promise to pay on the promissory note. So, for example, if I have in my right hand a $1 bill, on the face of it, of course, it says $1. So we buy things because $1 will buy a certain thing. day to day, that dollar bill may be worth more or less. Some days you look at the currency and a dollar is worth 75 cents. Other days you look at it and a dollar may be worth 85 or 90 cents. Okay, so the actual value of the dollar goes up and down. I mean, I can remember at one point when the dollar was worth $1.08, and I climbed on a plane and went to London and bought out everything I could find. So, you know, depending on what's happening with the currency, you need to look at it in that light. Well, now, in my left hand, I've got a 1-ounce silver coin, an American Eagle silver dollar. Again, it says $1 on it, right? So I can buy $1 worth of something with it. But here's the difference. I can take that silver dollar and literally go to any coin store and get probably at least $20 for it. So if I'm holding the dollar bill in my right hand and the Silver Eagle silver coin in my left hand, which has the greater value? So debt now drives the system. Money has no value except to the extent that debt exists. And I know that may be kind of a hard statement to swallow, but it's true. If the debt actually, if our national debt were paid off in full, then money would have no value at all. In 1985, the Internet was created, and of course that was the beginning of a whole new monetary age, because at that point, electronic money was created. And we've been living in that system for a long time now. Okay, jump with me now to 2008, and I'm sure all of you remember the summer of 2008. We had $6 trillion of derivative debt in the United States, and the mortgage market caved in. Well, let me talk to you a little bit. I'm going to give you a really simplistic, so please don't hold me to a great deal of detail here, because I'm not in front of you with a board to draw pictures on it for you, and we don't have time to go into a lengthy, detailed discussion. But let me give you a simplistic explanation of the Mandrake system and how that creates money. So let's just take the $700 billion bailout as an example, because I think we all remember when the bailout, the first $700 billion legislation was passed. That was actually passed in November of 2008. So it was during the very last part of the Bush administration. What a lot of people don't know or don't recognize or haven't really thought about is that there was another $750 billion bailout legislation passed in February of 2009 after President Obama took office. So, and I'm just going to use those two because there have been numerous bills passed since that time. So the number is now much, much greater than what I'm going to give you. Just keep that in mind. But I'm just using those two data points on the timeline. So just between those two pieces of legislation, we had over $1.5 trillion of debt created for the bailout. How do we get that money? Well, Congress passes the legislation. They go to the U.S. Treasury and say, okay, we need $700 billion in funds. Treasury says, well, we don't have $700 billion, so we'll have to get it. How do they get it? Interesting question. One of two ways. Either they go to the Federal Reserve, or they pass legislation on creating bonds, which of course bonds are debt. So then they put the bonds out to see who will buy them. Well, over the past 20 years, China has been the largest purchaser of U.S. debt in the world. There have been other countries as well, but China has been the leader in terms of riding in on the white horse and buying up U.S. debt whenever we needed to print money. If China or some other country doesn't come in to buy the debt, then the Federal Reserve buys it, and they do that by pressing the print button, because the Federal Reserve, not the U.S. Treasury, owns the print button to print money. So Federal Reserve turns on the printing presses, prints up $700 billion of money, and we fund the bailout. China, just as a sidebar, is not buying our debt these days because China has its own financial problems in terms of some raging inflation in its own country. So they're not buying up our debt at this point. But that's just an example of how the Mandrake system works, because in order to have $600 billion worth of derivatives, or $1 trillion worth of derivatives, I mean, you have to, what I call, slice and dice all those mortgage packages and so forth, and sell them off and sell them off and sell them off. And eventually what happens is that you are literally borrowing prosperity from the future to pay off what's going on today. And that's basically what happened with the bailout. So how does that get us? If you now look, let's go back to 1997. I met Sharon Lechter and Robert Kiyosaki and his wife Kim either in 1997 or 98. It was right after the very first Rich Dad book, Rich Dad Poor Dad book, came out. And that was an eye-opener to me. I was teaching in the entrepreneurship program at both the University of Arizona and also at Thunderbird. And it was like someone had handed me the keys to the city, because I had been trying to explain to my entrepreneurship students what kinds of things to look for when they were putting together their financial plans for their business plans that they were drafting. And over the years, as I have used Robert Kiyosaki's information, I've come to the conclusion that what Robert really is talking about is not economic or socioeconomic status or patterns. What he's really talking about are attitudes, beliefs, and habits that affect anybody's cash flow pattern. You know, you can have a lot of money and still be a poor money manager, or be a mediocre money manager, or you can learn all of the techniques to manage money like the wealthy do. So look at this in terms of a poor money manager. You know, you've got a job, the paycheck comes in, and it goes out immediately to pay for taxes, food, rent, clothes, all the toys, etc. Okay, now you've graduated up to being a little more savvy. Now you've got a paycheck coming in, and at least you're starting to look at some assets. You know, Robert doesn't call the house you live in an asset, because his favorite thing to say is, you know, assets put money into your pocket, liabilities take money out of your pocket. And so since most of us own a house that has a mortgage on it, that's a liability, and it's taken money out of our pockets. But at least you've started looking at something other than just having the money come in and go straight out. Now, what is it that people who have really learned to maximize their financial position, what is it that they do? They look at money in a totally different way. First of all, they look at assets, not just any old assets, but assets that create passive income. And with that passive income, they then generate dividends, interest, rental income, royalties, all kinds of things. Cash flow quadrant, E stands for employee. S is for either service industry or self-employed. B is business owner, and I is investor. So you can be in any one of these quadrants, either singly or in combination. They're not mutually exclusive. Well, Anthony Robbins is the great one for really wise sayings, and one of his quotes that I absolutely love is that success leaves clues. So first we need to look at a system. We need to do our due diligence. I'm a firm believer in the fact that you cannot do anything if you don't do your due diligence first. There's always a learning curve, always. I don't care how much experience you've got. There's always a new way to do something. Learning how to leverage time and mobility, having the right tools, and finding a mentor that can help walk you through the process. So how do we build wealth? What kinds of financial strategies? And I've got an entire checklist. In fact, I think we've got it on my website so that if you would like to have a copy of it, you can go to the website after the webinar and send me a message. But let's look at things like real estate, for example. You know, real estate is still a good strategy. There's nothing wrong with the strategy. It's just that it's a different strategy today than it was 3 or 4 years ago. You're probably not doing fixes and flips today, which we were doing a lot of 4 years ago. You're probably doing long-term buy and hold. Doesn't make it a bad strategy. It just means you have to look at it differently. People are still making millions in the real estate market. So don't mark it off your checklist. Internet cash machine. People make millions of dollars every single day on the Internet. There are all kinds of cash machines on the Internet. And I'm talking about valid business opportunities here. I'm talking about websites that generate millions of dollars worth of sales. Precious metals and gems. Gold and silver. One of Robert's, in addition to Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Cashflow Quadrant, one of Robert's advisory books is Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver, and it's written by Michael Maloney, who's an absolute authority on the subject of precious metals. So if you haven't already read Mike's book, I'd suggest that you get a copy because it's great, and it tells you anything and everything you ever wanted to know about precious metals. One of the big things that has happened in a big way, I mean, it's been around since the 50s, is network marketing. But it has become an entire industry unto itself. And all the people who, and I'm talking about the academic business gurus and all of the other people who originally said, well, the network marketing business model is no good, it doesn't work, you know, all those things that we heard 10, 15 years ago, all those people have now reversed themselves because people are making so much money in the network marketing industry. Do you need to do your research? Absolutely you do. Do you need to do your due diligence and make sure you've got a good company and a good product and one that's going to be around? Of course you do. You research that just like you research any other business or investment opportunity. That's not to say that you don't. It's just that now network marketing and direct sales have become a multi-billion-dollar industry. And one of my favorite economists, in fact, he's probably the only economist that I really understand, is a man named Paul Zane Pilzer, who has been an economic advisor to 2 different presidential administrations. He was the person way back in the 80s that went to Congress and said, we're going to have a crisis in the savings and loan industry. Congress shrugged its shoulders collectively and, you know, basically told Dr. Pilzer to go away. And sure enough, 2 years later, the whole system collapsed. He was also the person who went to Congress in this century, since 2000, and said, we've got a health care crisis. I think I have a solution for it. And Congress again shrugged its shoulders and told him to go away. And of course, now we know for sure that Congress believes that we have a health care crisis. Well, he has written a number of books on the next millionaires and a couple of other books. He's got one called The Wellness Revolution. Really, really interesting. He's a person who identifies trends. So if you want to know where he thinks things are going, pick up one of his latest books, because I just think he's a genius, and he's easy to understand. He writes in a way that everyone can hear the message and understand it. Intellectual property is one of my favorite things in the whole world, and it should be one of yours, because royalties off of any kind of intellectual property are one of the greatest financial strategies. I mean, when you put out a book, authors get royalties back. Now, of course, we've got ebooks, and here's a $1 million idea, of course. I mean, if you have a website and you can sell your book on your website as an ebook, there is no overhead cost. So all that money goes to you, not just a percentage in terms of royalties. I mentioned the Wellness Revolution, and that certainly has a lot to do with baby boomers. Go back and look at all the predictions in the year 2000. The prediction was, take a look at the baby boomers, follow the baby boomers. If you want to follow the money, follow the baby boomers, because we are, and I'm raising my hand since I'm one of them, we are the largest population on the face of the planet. So if you want to make money, look at what the baby boomers need, want, and are buying. Another strategy is arbitrage. People don't talk about this very much, and it's probably not real easy to understand for someone who's never looked at it before. But you can arbitrage all kinds of things. You can arbitrage currency. You can even arbitrage stock, I'm told. I've never done that, but friends who do it tell me that you can. You arbitrage sporting events all the time, right? Because you've got two teams, one of them's got to win. You know, there are no ties. So if it's a football team or a basketball team, you bet on both ends. You bet on both teams, because it's all mathematical. It doesn't have anything to do with emotion or with any kind of other strategy. It's all mathematically based. There is always going to be a mathematical difference. And so you're always going to be a winner. You're always going to make money if you arbitrage. Currencies. There are all kinds of Forex sites on the internet now. Currencies and, you know, buying currencies, buying and selling currencies is a big thing now. IRAs and retirement accounts. This is something that most financial planners, and I'm not singling out the industry, so for all my friends who are financial planners, please don't get upset. But any institution, and it can be banks, it can be insurance companies, because now insurance companies have figured out that they need to diversify and they need to be in all kinds of financial products. So it could be an insurance company, it can be a brokerage house of some kind. There are all kinds of institutions out there, trust companies, setting up individual retirement accounts, IRAs, and my favorite, which is the self-directed. Okay, so you've got either a self-directed traditional IRA, or you've got a self-directed Roth IRA. And Roths are really beneficial. Hopefully all of you started a Roth a number of years ago so that you've got some money built up in it, because you can take a self-directed Roth IRA and all the money that it earns in profit is not taxable. I'll give you the example of a young woman that I met at an IRA conference a couple of years ago in Fort Myers, Florida. She had a 401k at a bank that she worked at. She was laid off from the bank. She cashed out the little bit of money that she had in the 401k and put it into a Roth IRA and started buying property in downtown Fort Myers. Just little lots here and there, okay, unimproved lots. Her Roth IRA is now worth well in excess of $1.2 million. Let's just say, because I don't remember exactly what amount she put in it, but let's just say she put originally $20,000 in it, or built up her contributed amount to $20,000, and invested that $20,000, sold the property, invested again, sold the property, invested again, and she's now got an IRA worth over $1.2 million. The difference between $20,000 and $1.2 million is her profit, and it's not taxed. She can take that money out as long as the principal has been in there for longer than 5 years. So that's another whole strategy that a lot of people don't know that they have available to them. Same thing with a traditional IRA. In order to invest it, it has to be self-directed. Virtual businesses, that's what Timothy Ferriss is all about. He has taken a virtual business to the max. He's got real products. I mean, he sells real products. He offloads everything. He doesn't do anything himself. He has subcontractor manufacturers. He's got fulfillment houses that will drop ship when the orders come in. He has a system that is really worth looking at. If you want to run your business from anywhere in the world, which is what he does, then you need to take a look at Timothy Ferriss. Loans. You become the lender. Where is it written that you always have to borrow? You become the lender. You make the interest. I learned this from one of my college students. He said to me one day, I'm loaning money on the internet. And I said, are you really? What are you doing? And he said, well, he said I had to really research to find a credible site. But there are some companies out there who loan money to college students, and I make interest every single day. And I thought, wow, now there's a concept. So I got online, looked up the site he told me about, and sure enough. So you can become the lender. Real estate's been doing that for years. We call it private money lenders. So take a look at that. That's another way that you can build up wealth that most people don't think about. The new barter system, I'm going to cover that in a few minutes. That is really creative. You're going to really like that. Okay, now here are just some resources, and the thing that I want to show you, these are all the different kinds of ways that really wealthy people use to generate more wealth. The one thing I will say is that just recently, within the last 2 months, the definition for accredited investors has changed. It's been modified. We knew it was on the horizon. We just didn't know when or if it was going to actually pass. It has. And so now the joke I used to make about everybody who lives in California can be an accredited investor, that's no longer true. It used to be, that your personal home was included in your $1 million worth of assets. Now that the definition has been changed, that and a couple of other things have been withdrawn from what constitutes your net worth of $1 million or more. So here's something that my 12-year-old godson taught me. He's now 13, but a year ago, this is Logan. I was in Oklahoma City on the computer with Logan because his teacher had given the class an assignment that said, okay, you need to write an ABC book on your favorite subject. Well, Logan's favorite subject is Legos. He's the Lego genius as far as I'm concerned. And so that's the Death Star that he built along with another thing. I'm not sure if I gave that other one to him or anyway. It's always a challenge every year to find something that Logan hasn't built yet. But here's what he taught me. after 10 years of teaching in the entrepreneurship program at the U of A and at Thunderbird, it took my godson to show me a strategy that anybody can use. Because the thing that is most daunting to entrepreneurs or to investors or to anybody who's trying to write up a business plan about something they want to do is getting the plan put together. And what I realized after I went through Logan's book with him was that if you will take the alphabet and put down just one sentence for every single letter of the alphabet about what your idea is and how you want to implement that idea, by the time you get to Z, you will know your idea backwards, forwards, and inside out, which most people never get to because they freeze when they think a business plan. But this is great. Okay, here's wisdom from a 12-year-old. The fastest ship in the galaxy. If I were you, I would take the chance of flying it. That's the message to entrepreneurs. Don't give up. Get on that fast ship and take off. This is the B-wing, but it's so slow. So learn some maneuvering so you will live, right? It's all about learning the rules of the game and how to play the game so you can maneuver within it. And here is T. If that doesn't work, we have R2-D2 to get us into light speed. I just love that. Okay, but the message there is do something. Either use the alphabet or use some kind of a little system to help you focus your ideas on what your plan is, because you need to have your plan. You need to be focused. Now, here's a system. For those of you who have read One Red Paperclip, this is ingenious. Kyle MacDonald is from Canada, and he wrote a book called The One Red Paperclip, and it was based on his personal experience. And his personal experience went something like this. He was out of work. He was living with his girlfriend who was eager for him to get a job. And over Christmas vacation, I think if I remember the story correctly, his cousin and his dad said to him, well, what have you got? And he said, well, I have a red paperclip. And his cousin said, well, have you ever thought about putting it on Craigslist to see what you can get for it? So he did. Well, to make us a fascinating story short, because I want you to read it, you can get on his website, oneredpaperclip.com. You can also get his book, which is even more fun because it gives you all the detail. He went from a red paperclip in 2 weeks shy of a year, not quite a year. He and his girlfriend decided that they wanted to end up with a house. And sure enough, at the end of the day, his last trade was for a house. So if Kyle can take a red paperclip and trade up and trade up and trade up and ultimately get to his goal in less than a year with a house, then any of us can do it. I want to tell you about something else. I mean, my students say to me all the time, oh, I could never do that. You know, you only deal with people who do incredible things. Well, not the case. Not the case at all. Mark Victor Hansen wrote a book a year ago called The Richest Kids in America, and it is an eye-opener. It will take you through all your fears, all of your hesitations, all of your excuses, and I do mean excuses because really and truly that's what we're dealing with. We've got to get beyond our fears and our excuses when we make this paradigm shift. These kids are making millions, and they're doing it in all kinds of creative ways in all kinds of industries. Yes, some of them are on the internet, and, you know, one of my students said to me, well, that's because, you know, this boy comes from a wealthy family. Well, no, he was the youngest of 5 children, and he had a single mom, and his mom said to him, I can't afford a computer. maybe you could go to the library and use a computer to do this idea that he came up with. Well, he's a multimillionaire today. So, you know, even using the library computer, you can become a millionaire. So there are no excuses. If the young people can do it, then the rest of us can do it. But let me tell you what, and this is another Robert Kiyosaki story. Let me tell you what Robert did with the one Red Paperclip barter system. Because that system, interestingly enough, is not based on dollars. Usually when we think of barter systems, we think of a dollar system, okay? I'll trade you this, which is worth X dollars, for that you have, which should be worth X dollars, okay? So we're always talking about some kind of quid pro quo based on dollars. Well, Kyle's system is not based on dollars. It's the concept of when, and it's everything from paper clips to real estate and beyond. I mean, who knows what someone even more creative has done. Robert took this and did it with real estate. And in one of his seminars, they had a big board, and everybody in the seminar before they came was told to bring deals with them. And so they would put 6 or 8 deals up on the board, and then they would look to see how many trades it would take for every single person whose deal was up on the board to get a deal that was exactly what they wanted, suited them, and it had nothing to do with the value of the dollar value of the deal. It had everything to do with people walking away saying, I won. I got exactly what I wanted. So that's the new barter system. Okay, I know you've heard this. It's not what you make, it's what you keep. And one of the things that I do, obviously, as an attorney is I look at how to structure people so that they can maximize what they're making and keep as much of it as possible. Some of these are just, you know, the usual things, a C Corp, which is a standard corporation, or you can take an S election, or you can form a nonprofit. An LLC, of course, is a limited liability company. Partnerships, I know you know about, and sole proprietors, of course you know about that. What most people don't know about is the multi-series LLC. That's a really creative new type. There are only 9 states that have this law so far, but that's a really creative new type of business entity which will allow you to do some really creative things in terms of how you structure your business holdings. Okay, so let's just retrace one time. Develop your financial strategy. Shift your paradigm. Ask different questions. The questions you've been asking probably aren't getting you the result that you were hoping for. So start asking different questions. Make choices to have money and resources. Drop all of this lingo about I don't have, I can't have, it doesn't happen for me. Get rid of that. Think big. Think outside the box. Focus on your vision or your plan. And value yourself, value your ideas, value your choices. Your ideas and your choices are just as important as anybody else's are. So give yourself credit. Find new opportunities. They're abound everywhere. Open your mind so that you can see them when they come, because a lot of times opportunities show up, but the door is closed, and so somebody else gets the opportunity. Create multiple streams of income. Last year, you know, I said, hey, I want income that comes in monthly, weekly, and daily. So that's my goal. That's what I'm working on. What's your goal? Laugh and have fun. Take yourself lightly. I mean, this is fun. If it's not fun, then you're doing the wrong thing. Move forward. Keep your eyes on where you want to go, not on where you've been. That was something I learned from Wayne Gretzky, who was the hockey player in Canada, which probably some of you know. The reason Wayne Gretzky was such an incredible hockey player was because he said, I always look at where the puck is going, not where it is or where it's been. That's exactly what you have to do. Keep your eyes on where you want to go. And practice living abundantly. You have to practice. Get the mindset of being abundant so that you can just open those windows and let it come in. If you will, take a minute and go to my website, www.carolitaoliveros.com, and the correct spelling of my name is C-A-R-O-L-I-T-A, last name O-L-I, V as in Victor, E-R-O-S.com. My email address is oliveros@flash.net. And of course, my phone number, 520-907-5866. If you will go to my website, www.carolitaoliveros.com, click on Free Download. The tab at the top says Downloads. You just need to fill in the field with your name, your email, and your web address if you've got one. And I will send you a couple of free downloads that go with this presentation. So it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've had as much fun with this as I've had.